Hi, my name is Julie, and I'm about to tell you a story of something that happened to me a long time ago. I was in my early 20s, and it was the year 2000. I was living with a roommate in a pretty bad city. It was called Hayward. It's right outside of Oakland, which, of course, is right outside San Francisco. Back then, the Silicon Valley was booming. I lived very close to San Jose, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley, where all of the tech was exploding. Women had an opportunity during that time in San Jose. It was called bikini dancing. Now, before you think I'm a stripper, I'm not, and I wasn't. The rules in San Jose are very strict. You have to be 3 feet away from the client, and you must be fully clothed, which means a bikini like you would wear to the beach. I took advantage of the dot-com boom like many women did, and I made a lot of money. That evening, I had been out with friends. We'd gone to a restaurant, and I had a to-go box of food under my arm as I walked up to my apartment. I also had worked the previous evening and had about $1,000 in cash wadded up in a ball stuck in my purse. I lived in a wooded community, and we lived on the second floor. The stairs leading up to our apartment were old wooden slatted stairs. So I started to climb the stairs, holding my to-go box of food, as well as a small bag of groceries that I had picked up on the way home. As I was just putting my key in the lock, I heard steps from behind me, and I turned around in time to see a huge man bounding up the wooden stairs. And to me, my first reaction was that he looked like he was running from something. So I called out to him. I said, "Are you okay?" And before I could get the last word of my sentence out, he hit me so hard. My keys fell through the slats in the stairs down into the black alcove below the stairs. He clamped a hand over my mouth. I consider myself a pretty tough girl. I've been able to hold my own in fights, and I've had a pretty rough life, so I tend to throw punches and ask questions later. Most of my friends would attest to that. In this case, though, I wasn't ready. I didn't have anything in me to kick him in the balls or try to gouge his eyes out. I was absolutely frozen, and all of my muscles felt like rubber. I just slid down the wall onto my butt on the ground, and I held my purse out to him because I thought I was getting robbed. He looked at the purse, and I told him, I said, "It's a Prada purse. It has $1,000 of cash in it." I said, "Just take it." And he kicked it to the side. He didn't want that. And I knew at that point that I was in real trouble. The hand that he'd clamped over my mouth was huge. It covered my entire lower face. Sometimes in situations like that, we tend to feel like time slows down. And it sure did right then. I had time to have so many thoughts just about the glove that was clamped over my face. I remember thinking that it was exactly the same kind of glove that OJ wore during his attack on Nicole Simpson. It was an isotoner, I believe it's called. And I just had this strange thought, and I said, when they find me, I wonder if they'll know that he had an OJ glove on when he killed me. Then the man said, "Shut up. Nobody can hear you. Shut the fuck up." And I didn't say a word. He didn't need to worry because I was absolutely paralyzed with fear. He kept reaching his hand out to the doorknob. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm so lucky that I had not been a second closer to unlocking my door, or this situation was going to be even worse. And of course, the knob wouldn't turn because it was still locked. And he took a step backwards, and he accidentally knocked over my bag of groceries, and 2 bottles of wine clattered to the ground. It must have spooked him because he darted back into the night just as fast as he had appeared. I was terrified. I was up on top of the landing. I didn't know what I was going to do. I couldn't open my door. My keys were somewhere down in the pitch dark, and I didn't know if this man had gone back to get a friend, to get a gun, or even worse. I knew I needed to get my keys. I thought I'd scream for help first. A police officer actually was my next-door neighbor, and I pounded on their door first, but I would later find out that he was gone for the night. My roommate was gone as well. I started to scream for help. I screamed and screamed. I said, help me, please, somebody help me. Nobody came. Later, the police would question my neighbors, and one man said that he heard me scream, but he couldn't find his shoes. I went down the stairs, and back then we didn't have cell phones that had flashlights. We didn't have cell phones practically at all. We just had those new Nokias that were like little bricks. Anyway, I had no flashlight, so I just felt around in the dark with my toe of my shoes, and finally I touched the keys. I grabbed them up, and I turned out of the dark, and I took a glance around, didn't see anything, and I scampered up the stairs as fast as I could, unlocked the door, slammed it behind me, and locked it. I grabbed the phone off the wall, and I called 911. Within 3 minutes, at least 9 cop cars had showed up to my home. And I thought to myself, this is a very big response to an assault, especially in a city where it happens all the time. You know, at night you can hear sirens and helicopters and people screaming and gunshots. So why did they have such a heavy response to what happened to me? I was okay. I would later find out why there were so many police officers that responded. The detective that came in to discuss what happened with me and to take evidence was a creep. He was more interested in hitting on me than he was in figuring out what had happened and how to catch this man. The following day, I called him as promised, and I went to the police station to sit with a sketch artist. I didn't think I was going to be able to remember what the man looked like, but this woman was very talented, and she somehow pulled all the details out of me, and when she was done, she turned the page around, and I was looking at my attacker. It was frightening. About a week later, I got a phone call. They had apprehended somebody that they thought might be him, and they asked me to come for a lineup. The detective also told me what had happened with this man and why there was such a heavy response to my situation. The man had successfully raped 11 women in the neighborhood in the previous weeks, and we all looked alike, according to him. We were all short women, petite build, blonde hair, pretty girls. And I didn't think much of that until I got to the lineup. And only one other victim showed up for the lineup. She was sitting in the room alone when I got there, and she raised her head, and it was like I was looking in a mirror. This man definitely had a type, and it was so gross to think that he had been following me, and he knew the night that I would be alone. You know, when was he watching me? For how long? When I was doing what? It made me sick to think about. My creepy detective told me that he needed to get something before the lineup, and he left the woman and me alone in the room together. Naturally, we discussed what had happened to us. She asked me first. I told her my story, and she just nodded in understanding. And then I asked what happened to her. I was horrified. He scaled the side of her apartment, climbed up over into her balcony, opened the sliding glass door, and he raped her in her bed. And there she was, ready to point him out if he was indeed in the lineup. So our detectives came back in, and the lineup happened. The men filed out in a line and turned around, and I immediately saw my attacker. He was in slot D. I will remember that for the rest of my life. I knew from the gasp that I heard from the girl to my right that she also had seen him. I scrawled D onto my paper without waiting for the rest of the lineup. And something struck me as so sad. All the rest of the men that were there knew what crime they were in a lineup for, because they all had to step forward and say the terrible things that this man had said to us during our assaults. And I felt so bad for these men who just had fit a description. And when he had his turn, it was disgusting because it was exactly like when he attacked me. Even though he couldn't see through the one-way glass, I felt like he was staring at me, his eyes drilling into my brain, daring me to choose him. The lineup ended, and they filed out. My detective looked at me, and I said, yeah, he was there. And I looked at the other woman, and she said, D? And I nodded my head and said yes. My detective left, and hers did as well, to go do some paperwork or something. I'm not quite sure. We were so excited that he had been found. Our detectives came back after a time, and they looked very somber when they came in. The woman and I looked at each other and were wondering what in the world could have gone wrong. And they told us. Because my detective, he left us alone prior to the lineup, it constituted possible collaboration, and it negated the results of the lineup. The woman started to cry, and I was absolutely shocked. I looked at my detective and I said, please give me time. He looked at me confused and said, what do you mean? And I said, please give me time to get a head start before you let him go. And I didn't look at anybody else. I grabbed all my shit, got out to the parking lot. I drove home like a speed racer and locked myself in my apartment. I moved away soon after that. Obviously, I didn't want to stay there. I moved to the city that I live in now. I got married. I had children. I got divorced. I have had my career play out. But all this time, that man has always haunted me in the back of my head. And sometimes, in my dreams, he attacks me again. And often, when he reaches up for the doorknob, it turns easily under his gloved grip. Telling my story has been cathartic. At first, I was skeptical, but it has helped to say the words out loud. I have a message for other women who have endured an assault. It is not your fault what happened. Listen to me as I say that again. What happened is not your fault. Nothing you said, nothing you wore, no place you were, no flirting that you did made it happen. Sexual assault is not about sex. It's about power. The less power that we give our attackers, the more that we heal. And I wish you healing, safety, and peace. Our attackers did not get the best of us. There is so much beauty left to be had in life.